Welcome back to our journey on restoring the Sega Pico. Last time we disassembled the system and discussed the hardware. We still have a lot of work to do, such as replacing the hinge at the bottom of the Pico, which was damaged beyond repair, and clean the rest of the system up and reassemble the Sega Pico. So without further ado, let's begin part 2 of the Sega Pico restoration. So we begin the episode by retrobriting this part of the shell for the Sega Pico. As you can see, the purple has lost its colour, with various areas around the Pico showing its original purple colour. The first method I used was the plastic container with a small amount of hydrogen peroxide placed inside the tub. However, due to the colder temperatures, this method was not possible, and instead I decided to do the Retrobrite process indoors and cover the box with tin foil and use cream peroxide and cover it over the shell. Using a UV light, I leave the Retrobrite process to take effect for around 14 hours. Once the process is complete, I give the shell a clean and shower, removing all the peroxide, and leave it to dry until the next morning. So it's been about 24 hours since this shell was completely washed to remove all the peroxide, and it's been left to basically air dry since then. So we've got some positives and negatives that have come from basically retrobriting the shell. So the positive, the first one, is that the original purple is basically now more vibrant now. Basically all the dirty kind of purple is kind of gone now. So basically it's a lot more vibrant and more true to its original colour. So that's really good. The negatives are, unfortunately, as you can see, we have the label, which unfortunately suffered, where the peroxide must have gone inside the label and it's now basically bleached the label, and it's created this kind of pink around it. So nothing too concerning. It's nothing like where it's damaged or anything like that, because you can still see all the text and all that. So that's absolutely fine. That is. The next bit, which unfortunately was already a concern before the Retrobrite, but now is still there, is still all these marks here. So this basically, all the marks were originally there. So this clearly means that all these marks are basically inside the plastic. They're part of the plastic now, so you can't remove these, unfortunately. So I'm not going to concern too much about it. We've cleaned the shell now. We have it's a lot more purple. It's back to its true form of its original purple colour, which I'm really happy by. But we also now need to retrobrite one last piece, which is a part of the shell and hides the pen connector and additional screw. As you can see, the retrobrite process has really worked on the main shell, so we now need to replicate that with this final piece. We'll leave the retrobrite process to do its thing and check on it every 3 hours. So let's now talk about the broken hinges that I tried to super glue, but unfortunately the plastic was too brittle and required a new one to be made. So since then I have sent off the hinges to a 3D specialist company called Be Captivated. When they arrived, the other hinge arrived broken, but this was to be expected by how brittle the original parts were. Tina from Be Captivated started by removing all the old super glue from both hinges and started the complex challenge of measuring and recreating each hinge on a 3D design software. Once this process is done, each part is printed on a 3D printer. The parts are then hand painted to closely match the original parts and then coated in a resin. This is done to strengthen the parts and avoid the same issues that the original parts had. And finally, the sealer was added. With the parts now all complete, they were sent off and I received them a few days later. So here we have the original hinges, which have completely shattered, and we have the brand new hinge right here, which I am so pleased with. The amount of detail that's been put into this hinge, from the corners inside with like the screw posts and where the ribbon cable's got to go. Just, I'm really pleased with this, and honestly, it's got some weight to it, which makes it feel like this is not going to break like what this is. But basically, it's completely shattered, so this is going to be very sturdy, and it's going to hold up for many more years than what this has. I mean, so yeah, Tina has done an amazing job, and I thank her so much for it, because literally this is all she's been able to reference from, just these broken pieces here, and she has done an amazing job. So if you are looking to get parts recreated because they're not available online, I will put a link of a Facebook page at the bottom. I will. And yeah, where to get in contact with her, because she does an amazing job, and I 100% recommend her. Thank you so much, Tina, for your amazing work. Next, we're going to focus on the shell, which has the main touchpad, has the controller buttons, and holds the pen. As you can see, it is very dirty and needs a clean. Originally, I was going to tear down this part. There are clips around the shell. However, the plastic is identical to the hinge, and I believe that tearing it down would cause unnecessary damage to a potentially very fragile ABS shell. So instead, we're just going to use a clean cloth. We first have to remove the guided paper that can be easily removed by lifting the tabs around the square pad sensor. With that done, we can now proceed with cleaning the shell. And for the guided paper, I use a damp tissue to lightly wipe over the surface. With that now clean, we can now reinsert the paper. Now we are going to reassemble the Sega Pico, starting with the cartridge port, and installing it back into the shell with the spring correctly installed. Once that is done, we can now reinstall the two main boards to the main shell. Removing the shield will make it easier to reinstall the two lower screws that screw onto the main board. And then we can reinstall the remaining screws around the shield, not forgetting the ground cables that connect to the ground planes. With all the screws now reinstalled, we can now focus our attention on connecting the brand new hinge to the touchpad. First, we need to unscrew the 3 screws holding both parts of the hinge. Before we can reinstall the hinge, we have to file down the hole which holds the plastic nut, as it needs to sit flush to the hinge. And with both hinges now filed down, we can now place the plastic nut flush to the hinge. We next place one of the hinges at the bottom of the touchpad shell, position the cable, and insert the plastic nut and its corresponding spring. While keeping the nut and spring in place, we can then put the second part of the hinge on top. We then turn everything over and screw down the 3 screws to hold down the hinge. And with that done, we can now proceed with connecting the touchpad shell to the shell that holds the Storyware cards. being careful when inserting the wires and the ribbon cables through the storyware shell. To connect the shell, we finally press down on the plastic nut, and with this, both shells are now connected together. We then reinstall the 6 screws around the touchpad shell. Next, we connect all the cables from the touchpad boards to the main Pico board. And tie knot the cable to the washer before inserting it to the main Pico board. We then put both shells together lock them down and then screw the final remaining screws around the shell. And then finally, we connect the pen back up and reattach the final piece to the Pico. And after a long journey, the Sega Pico is now fully reassembled and back to its former glory. A brand new hinge specifically created for this Pico after the original was damaged beyond repair. And the system given a good clean, repairs made to it, especially the cartridge flap and a Retrobrite on the discoloured plastic. And the final thing to do is to test the system by inserting a storyware cart and powering on the device. It is great to finally experience one of the games that came packed in with the Sega Pico at launch. The Sega Pico was truly an amazing educational system for the younger audiences for its time, and I'm really honoured to have this system in my collection now. I hope you've enjoyed this journey to restoring the Sega Pico. Thank you so much for watching this journey on restoring the Sega Pico. And until next time, bye for now.